This is the one song everyone would like to learn. The song that is irresistible. The song that forces men to leap overboard in squadrons, even though they see the beached skulls. A song nobody knows because anyone who has heard it is dead, and others can't remember. You're listening to Carolina Haints. Welcome, dear listener, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. The word circus has been around since the 14th century, but it didn't start to resemble what we know as the circus today until the late 1700s, when Philip Astley built a place in London where horse riding stunts could be highlighted. He added jugglers, acrobats, and clowns to fill in between animal acts. And voila, the modern circus was born. In the early 1800s, the circus came to the United States and made men like P.T. Barnum famous and wealthy. But our story takes place in 1911, when a traveling circus stopped at the tiny town of McCall, South Carolina. While there, a fight broke out among the performers, and one man was stabbed in the head with a tent stake. The man's name was Concetto Formica, but because he was skinny and Italian, everyone simply called him Spaghetti. Spaghetti's father rushed him to the nearest hospital, which was 8 miles away in Laurinburg, North Carolina. But it was useless. He passed away a few hours later. The body was taken to nearby McDougald Funeral Home in Laurinburg, where he was embalmed. Spaghetti's father came by with a partial payment for the funeral services and said that he would return in a few days with the balance. So the McDougalds stored the body and waited. Before long, they needed the space, so they sealed the body in a glass case and stored it in the garage. And they waited. Pretty soon, word got around that there was a bona fide mummy over at the McDougald place, and people started stopping by to look at it. And still, they waited. Eventually, the McDougalds saw an opportunity to begin charging people to see the Laurinburg mummy. Now, if it sounds like they waited more than a few days for Spaghetti's father to return, you'd be correct. 61 years went by, and the Laurinburg mummy remained in the garage of the McDougald Funeral Home. Finally, in 1972, the case drew the attention of a congressman from New York. He was of Italian descent and said the display was abhorrent to the dignity of all Italian Americans. But the McDougalds defended their position, saying, "What's the difference in having this man here and having all those mummies in museums?" The congressman sent the funeral home a check for $15, the amount of the original bill in 1911. The check came in an envelope with the postage paid by the United States taxpayers. The McDougalds returned the check with a note which read, "This stamp paid for by the McDougald family." They said the current total, including storage fees, would be over $5,000. In the end, the townspeople raised enough money for Spaghetti to have a top-of-the-line burial. He now lies in Hillside Cemetery in Laurinburg, under a marker with a unique engraving on it, which reads, Concetto Formica, died April 28, 1911, aged 23 years. Buried September 30th, 1972. Now we go from a carny legend to a legend that sounds like it came out of a carnival. If I were to tell you of a siren in a river in North Carolina, you'd probably start imagining some sort of Fuji mermaid like we talked about in the Mermaid Riots episode earlier this season. But this is a tale of the siren of the French Broad River. Now, I don't know if I'm jaded or desensitized or what, but the first thing I think when I hear that name is how North Carolina came to have a river named the French Broad. It's exactly a reminder of a time when part of North Carolina was a French territory. I won't go into the particulars of the French-Indian War, but it culminated a period of 50 years of conflict between Britain and France, and it was fought right here in North America. We were, after all, a British colony, but the French controlled large portions of America and Canada, which is why parts of Canada still speak French today. The French-Indian War ended in 1763 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. Part of that agreement said that any rivers flowing onto the Mississippi River were French territory. Not all rivers in North Carolina empty into the Atlantic Ocean. The French Broad flows west through Tennessee to the Mississippi. But long before any of this, the river was known as Selica to the Cherokee, and that's where our tale originates. The Cherokee warned early settlers about the dangers of hiking along the French Broad River. They claimed that many a man had walked that path, never to be seen again by the living. The tale said that if one was to follow the river west from what is now Asheville, the first day or two would be peaceful. The gentle, hypnotic babbling of the river, the stillness of the forest. But slowly, you may notice things begin to change, subtly at first. You may see the figure of a woman appear in your dreams. At first, she's far in the distance, barely more than a vague shape. But she gets a little closer each night, until you even begin to see her during the waking hours. You may even notice the woods themselves begin to take on a more ominous feeling. And something about the sound of the water. There's a sound. Is it singing? The sound fades the more you try to listen for it. At first. But that too becomes more distinct as the weary days drag on. Your sleep will be broken and restless. By now, the woman is much closer and defined. You see her as a beautiful, raven-haired woman with black eyes, clothed in nothing but starlight. And there would be no peace during the day either. The woods now completely menacing. You dare not leave the safety of the path, and the sound is now louder, closer. There's no denying that it's the sound of a woman singing, although the words are in a language unknown to you. Finally, you come to a place where the river forms a deep, still pool with water so murky and dark that you can't see anything beyond the surface. For some reason, you're unable to move on. You stand on the edge of the river, staring into the pool. Time passes, but you have no idea how long. Then, as you watch, the dark-haired woman breaks the surface of the pool in front of you. She sings her song for you and extends her hand. You simply aren't able to resist. You aren't even sure if you want to resist. You reach out and take her hand. But the hand that grasps yours no longer belongs to a beautiful woman. It's cold, scaly, and the woman, well, She's a wild-eyed demon with a skull-like face. Even the strongest of warriors are unable to escape her once she has you in her arms. She pulls you to her, pulls you close, pulls you down into the pool and beyond. She's known as the Siren of the French Broad River, and your soul belongs to her. To find more about these stories, check out blogs.lib.unc.edu. There's NorthCarolinaGhost.com, ApplewoodManor.com, and OnlyInYourState.com. This episode was researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran and is produced and hosted by me, Dan Sellers. You can find everything Jeff's up to at darkerworld.com. You can find everything that we're up to at WreakHavocProductions.com. Special thanks to Gigi Galdo for providing the hypnotic sounds of the siren. You can find the Carolina Haints podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or you can listen directly from the feed at carolinahaints.libsyn.com. As always, you can find everything about Carolina Haints at our website, carolinahaints.com. Be sure to check out the book, Carolina Haints, Ghost, Folklore, and Mysteries of the Old North State, in bookstores and libraries now. Be sure to like the official Facebook page at facebook.com/CarolinaHaints. You can find me on Twitter at Hank vs. the Undead, and we're on Instagram at WreakHavoc Productions. As always, you can send your questions and concerns to WreakHavocProductions@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in then to hear more about those things that go bump in the night.